Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Breckland Planning for today. Could I first of all start out by doing what we class as our general housekeeping? With regards to fire exits, there are two quite clearly marked on this side of the room. There is another one at the end of the corridor where the lavatories are, and also the door that you entered this building. There are no tests put down for today, so if we hear the alarms go, we will treat them as genuine. And I would say to you, best to follow any of the councillors out to the room because they will be going very fast because they just want to get out. So just follow them like if you can keep up with them, and we'll congregate in the car park. Phones and mobile devices, could I ask you to switch your phones or mobile devices to silent? If they do go off, it's a £10 fine to the chairman's charity. That's the chairman of the council, not me as chairman of this committee. And his chosen charity this year, I usually look to you, Peter, because you're best at this. I know East Anglian.
Big C and the Anglian Children's Hospice.
Yes, Big C and East Anglian Children's Hospice. So your money will go to a good cause, although I will scowl at you for disturbing my meeting. Procedure, as each item is read, I have a list of people who have recorded down to speak. I'll ask you to come and sit on the right-hand side where one of our councillors is sitting, and the officer will give the presentation. I will give you your times when you can speak, and then it will go over to questions from the members, and finally we will take a vote on the item. While you're doing your allotted time, when it comes to the end and you're not looking at a clock, I will be, and you will hear the bell which will tell you to sum up and not immediately stop. So just to sum up, come to the end of a sentence. If you decide that sentence is going to take 15 minutes, I do have the power to switch your microphone off, which is a wonderful thing that you get as chairman. You get the one special piece of equipment. So that's how we will go. Introductions for today. We have Simon Wood, who's our head honcho with us today. On my right-hand side, my right-hand woman is Rebecca Collins, one of our chief planning officers. We've also got Barbara Greengrass, one of our planning officers, and Will Hornbuckle at the back. You can just see him. He might wave if we're lucky. There we go. And we've got Chris Fitzgerald, who's one of our planning officers, who's acting as our usher for today, and also Julie Britton from Democratic Services, who takes our minutes and makes sure we all behave ourselves. Okay, so we will start the agenda, and that's item 1 is the minutes for the meeting held on the 30th of July. I hope you've all read them, and do I have your authority to sign those minutes? Thank you. There we go, Julie, that's yours. Thank you. Item 2, Julie, do we have any apologies and substitutes?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we have one apology from Councillor Bowes, but we have no substitutes in attendance.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest and any representations that you have received. I will take them as each item is raised. Item 4, Chairman's announcements. I've got nothing to tell you today, so we can move swiftly on. Item 5, do we have requests to defer applications? None of those. Do you have any items of urgent business? None of those. Wow, we're really getting on today. Okay, so item 7, put the brakes on as we have a local plan update from Simon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and we do have things to update on, I'm afraid. So yeah, Councillor Clark's got his hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question for Simon Wood. It's really, Simon, when do you anticipate, obviously you're dependent on what comes out from government, any further amendments, guidelines around the new national policy, planning framework and developments, planning targets, etc.? I realise that's something which may be a little way off, and I'm sure you'll give, sufficient notice for the committee and all members. Thank you.
He's just set out my agenda there.
I know,
Chairman.
I just thought so.
Yeah. So yeah, so
He was hoping to pull a rabbit out of the hat, but you've told him the rabbit's already in there. So
There we
now
go.
we're done for now.
So as Councillor Clark has alluded to, we have a consultation out on a potentially revised national planning policy framework, which sets out some fairly fundamental changes, particularly in terms of housing numbers. You will obviously be aware that the proposals set out in the consultation would increase the numbers from the 661 set out in the current local plan update, though I note the spreadsheet accompanying it says 625. We're struggling a bit to work out where that number's come from, but that's what it says. We're working on 661. And it would increase it up to 917. So that does obviously have implications for the process that we're going through at the moment. This is still a consultation document. Those numbers are yet to be fixed. I'm assuming, because there are questions within the consultation about the methodology. So you would hope that if there are concerns about the methodology, government will take those into account when finalising the document. The MPPF we expect to be published towards the tail end of this year. My cynical view is probably Christmas Eve. That's just me being cynical. But it is due out in December. And if those figures are confirmed, or a significant uplift in figures is confirmed, then every authority is going to have to review where it is in terms of its local plan and its 5-year housing land supply as well. So quite clearly that has implications for two matters, one of which is the local plan timetable, the other is the 5-year housing land supply. In terms of the local plan timetable, we are taking a report to Cabinet on the 23rd of September to set out what we think is the most appropriate course of action at the moment, given the degree of uncertainty around the proposed figures, and also given where we were up to, having regard to the transition arrangements set out in the consultation document. As members will recall, we finished our Regulation 18 consultation in the middle of July, and we were looking to produce our Regulation 19 document around about January, February time, and to try and submit before the transition period for the current local plan reforms kicked in June. The indication seems to be that June deadline for transition over to the new plan making process will now be pushed back to December 2026. But the government seemed committed to that plan making process as set out by the previous government. So as I say, that will be set out in a report to Cabinet on the 23rd of September. We are continuing, because it makes sense to do so, to tabulate all the consultation responses we received in terms of the Reg 18 consultation responses. We're still continuing to do the work on the strategic sites, and we're also looking to see where we are in terms of additional sites if we are required to produce additional numbers. One of the other overriding elements of the National Framework consultation is the really re-emphasising and reiterating the strategic duty to cooperate and the strategic need to try and meet unmet housing requirements with your neighbouring authorities. So that is something that we're keeping a close eye on. We have 3 authorities, North Norfolk, West Norfolk and West Suffolk, which have had significant increases proposed through the document to their housing requirements. So that is a matter that at some stage we as a council are probably going to have to consider and engage with them with. But it is a two-way process. In terms of planning resources, we were continuing to use external support. We're reviewing that at the moment, subject to any decision that may be made by Cabinet. We have now recruited to the Planning Policy Manager post following the sad departure of Laura Waters. but we anticipate that that individual won't be able to start for about another 2.5 months because they're working out a notice period. We've also successfully recruited to the policy officer post, and we're looking for that individual who is local, which is good news, to start in around a couple of weeks. So the planning policy team should be up to speed, hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months. Though I anticipate at some stage we'll probably still need to utilise external support, depending on the timetable that we finalise. Thank you, Chairman.
Any questions, Councillor Atwell, and then Councillor Kyber?
Yeah, thank you for that report, Simon. Could I ask about green space provision? Because in the Reg 18 consultation, if memory serves, we say in there that the council carried out a review of all the available open space, play provision, etc. in Breckland. We last did that in 2015, but we are currently carrying out a further review. Can you tell me when that review will be completed and when we'll be publishing that? Because I think that could have quite a bearing on some applications.
So we're combining two pieces of work. We're combining an open space assessment with a playing pitch review and strategy as well. We anticipate that that work will start to be issued in draft form probably early next year. In terms of the playing pitch strategy, we have to do a summer and winter review alongside Sports England. So I think from memory that we're probably looking about another 6 months but before we can start seeing any results from that. That is a piece of work that we will be continuing with because it sets a good baseline not only for ourselves through the local plan but also colleagues elsewhere in terms of looking to support playing pitches and sports provision within the district.
You're coming back?
Yeah, could I just ask then, so when do you anticipate that that new report will be a material planning consideration for applications?
I have to say I don't have a date fixed. We will need to make sure that it's robust and fit for purpose, but at some stage we will need to determine applications on the basis of the latest additional evidence, but we will still have to have regard to our current policy. So I will take that away and we'll come back and give you a more detailed response, Councillor.
Councillor Kyber, please.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of accommodating additional numbers, do you see any scope for relaxation of the stone curlew buffer, given that the research data for that is now 12 years old?
Thank you, Councillor. That is something we have picked up. We are just in the process of starting to discuss with neighbouring authorities, West Suffolk in particular, the implications of the special protection area and how we may engage with Natural England around that. So it's very much a live topic. It is something that we have to address because it is a significant constraint on where we can produce housing in the district. So it is something that we're picking up, as I say, with neighbours and subsequently with Natural England.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. Simon, will these new numbers have any implications on neighbourhood plans? And in my ward, I've got one going through at the moment. Would you recommend they suspend that until they know if they've got to put more sites forward, or how will it implicate them?
Current neighbourhood plans will still carry weight having regard to the advice in national guidance and national framework. I think if neighbourhood plan groups that are either considering or undergoing a review or looking to start a new plan, it's probably sensible for them to come in and speak to us and we can have a more detailed discussion about the implications. I think the difficulty at the moment is that it is still a little bit of an unknown as to what will come through. My personal view is that I don't anticipate any significant changes from the consultation document, but at the moment we can't guarantee that. So I would suggest that they make contact through the planning policy team and come in and have a chat with us.
No further questions. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to item 8. It's our deferred applications. We have an item on here for Beatley and Gressenhall, which is the Shrublands, Gressenhall Road, reference 3PL 2022 1414F. And speakers on this item, I have David Parkinson, who's an objector. I also have Henry Osota Day, who's the agent, Matt Sawyer, who's the architect, who's coming for questions only apparently, and Councillor Richard Duffield, who's the ward rep already in place. Are you going to cross the floor? Okay, yeah, I weren't sure if that's on. And Councillor Attewell is crossing the floor for this item. Okay, Barbara, over to you, please.
Okay, good morning, members. So you will recall this item was presented to the last planning committee on the 30th of July, and it was deferred due to concerns expressed by members on the impact of the proposed dwelling on plot 8 on the residential amenity of the neighbouring occupiers. So since that committee, amended plans have now been received and residents and the parish have been reconsulted, and to date no representations have been received on the amendments. So we have a residential development of 12 dwellings, including affordable homes and specialist housing. You can see here, this is the site, and you can see it's surrounded on 3 sides by residential development. This is the site in relation to the settlement boundary of Beatley. You can see here that it is surrounded on 3 sides by the settlement boundary of Beatley. An aerial photograph of the site as it is now is an open field with a building. That was the previous site plan, but I'll come back to that. So this is now the amended site plan. I will show you a more detailed comparison as we go through of the changes. So basically, this is the change. You can see the previous plan on the left and the new plan on the right side. I'll come back to that when I speak about residential amenity. Just taking you through the application briefly. Plots 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8 with the previous and the new elevations. 9 and 10, 11 and 12, and an aerial perspective. And some photographs of the site. This is the street scene with the site entrance. Just here, the existing development to the front. Site access. And taking you around the site, that's looking to the east. Again to the east. You can see looking north, you can see Beatley Grange and Meadow Close. Looking north. And the existing development. So if we look at the principle of development, Beatley is identified within the local plan as a village with boundaries. Policy HOU 04 does allow for development immediately adjacent to the settlement boundaries, subject to compliance with all of the other policies of the plan and 4 listed criteria. So looking at each of these in turn, but firstly highlighting that the site is immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary, as it abuts the boundary on 3 sides. The development is considered to be of an appropriate scale and design for the settlement. It's not considered to amount to significantly more than the 5% target allowed for in the policy, providing for an increase of 7.6%, and it provides for 11 dwellings above that target. So it's considered also that the design preserves the historic nature and connectivity of the community, and the proposal would not lead to the coalescence of settlements. Therefore, it does comply with policy HOU 04. So the scheme provides for 4 affordable homes in line with policy requirements and in the form of 4 2-bedroom bungalows. These are sited along the eastern boundary. It also provides for 5 3-bed specialist bungalows for occupation by the elderly. This is considered to be an additional benefit of the scheme to be given weight in the planning balance, and these are sited to the rear of the site along the northern boundary. Occupation of all these dwellings will be secured in perpetuity by Section 106 legal agreement. The agreement also secures provision of on-site open space and play area, which you can see in the centre of the site. And this is all provided in accordance with policy requirements of Policy ENV04 of the local plan. So you can see from the layout that the visual impact of the development is quite acceptable because the site is quite enclosed within existing built form. And looking back at the elevations, just take you back through those. So it's considered that the design and layout and mix are acceptable, providing for good quality design. Careful consideration has been given to the site context as required by the Breckland Design Guide. The 2-storey dwellings have been sited to the west, which prevents overlooking and are in keeping with the dwellings already constructed along the site access. Materials are acceptable, being a mix of red brick and buff and grey or red pantiles, in line with the existing properties to the site frontage. So looking at residential amenity, as I said, amendments have been made to the plan. You can see here the previous proposal, plots 7 and 8 have now been swapped around. So the houses have just been swapped. So you can see on plot 8 now, where members had previous concerns, the eastern side elevation has no side windows and has a length of 6.5 metres, as opposed to the previous dwelling of 13.7 metres. And it's proposed to be sited at 4.3 metres from the boundary fence and a further 3.7 metres from the neighbour's sunroom. The kitchen window is then 8.5 metres away from the boundary. So it's considered that this is an acceptable relationship to the amenities of that neighbouring property. So looking now at access, the access is provided, as you've seen, from the existing access, which serves the recently constructed dwellings to the front. And it has a footpath access to the village to the east. Concerns have been raised by the ward councillor regarding increased traffic at the site access, especially at school times when cars park either side of the access. Concerns were also raised from local residents and the parish about the suitability of the narrow width of Gressenhall Road and the additional traffic that would be generated. But the Highways Authority have raised no objection, and it's therefore considered that the application could not be refused on this basis, as it's considered that the additional cars would not have a severe impact on highway safety. Looking at flood risk and drainage, part of the site to be developed lies partly within, I'll just go to the site plan. That's the amended site plan. So part of the site lies within the surface water flow path, but all dwellings have been sited outside of this, and the surface water strategy adequately deals with this on site with the provision of soakaways, swales and suds features within the open space. So the Flood Authority have now raised no objection, are happy with this. In terms of ecology, again, various surveys looked at impacts on ecology and habitat site, and this has all been satisfactorily dealt with in terms of the on-site ecology and impacts on protected sites. The site does, however, lie within the Natural England Nutrient Neutrality catchment, and the applicant has worked at length to achieve an acceptable mitigation solution to allow delivery of this development and allow for a solution that's acceptable, which is acceptable to Natural England. Thinking about trees, a tree survey and arboriculture report was submitted, and this shows an acceptable impact on trees on the site. So therefore, we're recommending approval of this development. It provides for new housing and a policy compliant provision of affordable housing, with the additional weight to be given to the additional benefit of 5 specialist housing units, for occupation by older residents. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, Councillor Duffield, would you like to go first or last? Okay, and Councillor Attawell? Well, before last, yes. Okay, thank you. I've got David Parkinson, please, who's an objector. You have 3 minutes, sir, if you'd make sure, yeah, you're switched on. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm here representing the views, not just of myself, but of probably the majority of objectors in Beatley Grange. We feel quite disappointed with the way in which this whole development has came about. Although it's 2 separate developments, the first of 5 properties being within the development boundary, it's really one development. It's necessary from planning means to have put 2 applications in. In that respect, if you consider them as one, the amount of affordable housing that's been incorporated into the plan isn't sufficient. We feel that what Beatley particularly lacks is a development plan of its own. I listened to your introduction and I haven't the first idea of all the things that are involved in planning. Clearly, it's very complex. However, if we had a suitable development plan for our village, there'd probably be at least another 7 or 8 sites that we would consider were more suitable than this particular one. We are where we are. Things occur and plans are submitted. There's lots of things have been mentioned in the objections people have put in. Overfull schools, oversubscribed doctors' surgeries, no dental practices. Those problems exist everywhere, and I don't think much attention's paid to them. You rarely ever come across any new infrastructure developments in the whole of our county, unless they're major ones. Clearly, they're problems that the planning committee have got to grapple with. But we're at the receiving end, and in terms of the actual development boundary that exists for our village, most people like me seem to think that that should be sacrosanct. Now, we have to have change, we have to have new housing. I don't think this development actually provides the housing our village needs. Not just me, several of us think that. And we can only get it really through developing a village plan of our own. I'm certain there's villages other than Beatley that don't have a proper neighbourhood development plan. Swanton Morley seems to be an excellent example of what you can achieve. Now, I'd be prepared to help with something like that, but I can't drive something like that because I'm a full-time carer. And to sum up, I think there should be a change in strategy to try and help villages like ours, bring the people out to try and create those development plans, which would try to avoid situations like this where you have a lot of residents who are quite dissatisfied with the outcome and they'd have the opportunity to create something. But
Okay.
we need help from people like yourselves to try and create that.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you. I've now got Henry O'Sotterday, who's the agent. 3 minutes, please, sir.
So I'm pleased to bring this. Hello, that's better. Okay. So I'm pleased to bring this scheme back to you so rapidly, following our deferral last month, to provide additional information on the Plot 8 design, which has impacted upon the neighbour. And I'd like to thank Barbara Greengrass for her proactive approach in working with us to achieve this so quickly. Since then, we've taken on board the concerns raised by neighbours and members and revised the scheme design to Plot 7 and 8. In doing this, I hope we have demonstrated our commitment as a local developer to delivering high-quality housing schemes. And I would also like to note that the extension to the neighbouring property in question was built after application was actually submitted, so it was not recorded on any of the survey information we had previously. We have also not been able to locate any records of planning or building control approval for it. In any case, our revisions substantially lessen any impact from our development to this neighbour, and there are now no windows on the side elevation of our plot 8. The width of the building adjacent to the neighbour is just 6.5 metres as opposed to 13.7 previously, and the eaves height is just 2.4 metres. The single-storey bungalow has also been moved an additional 2 metres away from the boundary, making it 4 metres from the fence line, and we've omitted the garage to plot 8. The building is over 8 metres away from the extension of the neighbours in question and 12 metres from the main building at 3 Meadow Close. The planning officer considered the scheme acceptable in terms of amenity impact previously, and I hope that this amendment shows we've exceeded our brief in this instance where perhaps a larger development may have not. I hope this addresses the reasons for deferral from the last submission. And I just want to recap on the scheme. We are proposing a small-scale housing development of high-quality homes, which provides for a full spectrum of the community. There's just 3 open market houses on this development. We've got single-storey affordable housing, first-time housing, specialist bungalows and family housing. And amongst this, we've also included public children's play areas and open spaces for nature. And we've set the tone, we hope we've set the tone and example for this scheme with the Phase 1 houses, which we've displayed on the boards. The scheme will try and integrate this range of housing with seamless quality, so you'll not be able to see the difference between tenure types or properties. We have no objections from any of our consultees, including highways, the tree officer, ecology, contaminated land, housing enabling, angling water, flooding, or natural England. We've also agreed a specific solution to the nutrient neutrality on this scheme, which allows us to proceed with a positive impact on the environment, which many schemes are unable to do. And this is via upgrades to the existing treatment system in the local area. The scheme is directly on the outside of the village red line boundary, but it adjoins it on 3 sides, which we feel is a natural extension to the village development pattern. The additional traffic we hope for this level of development will be minimal, and the road width and footpath is to highway standards. We're also providing electric charging points to all plots. We will secure the sections 106 will secure the specialist housing legally and in perpetuity, as Barbara mentions. Clayland assure members that this scheme will be delivered rapidly and to very high standard. I hope members now feel confident in allowing this scheme to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go over to Councillor Attewell, please. Bound by 3 minutes as well, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sitting this side of the fence on now we're hearing this application the second time. You'll know, members, that I raised significant concerns about plot 8. I was contacted by email via the architect after the last meeting with the revised proposals. I forwarded them on to you'll also recall that there was a Mrs. Baldwin who was here, who was the neighbouring property who was going to be severely affected by that. So I sent all those details to her. I have explained to her in planning terms that nobody has a right to review, as upsetting as that is. But I think we could both see that this is a significant improvement on the last application. That layout is significantly better for her in terms of the outlook from her property, and I'm grateful for Clayland for doing that. The other thing I just want to say is, in terms of this plot of land and what Mr. Parker was saying, this piece of land has been put forward in the local plan review anyway, as I understand it, as one of the pieces of land that have been put forward. So even if this application was refused now, there's a very good chance that that would get developed at some point in the future, because that land has been put forward in that Reg 18 consultation. So that's something in terms of the settlement boundary I think we need to consider. And also in terms of the development plan for Beatley, I could just say to you, I was the chairman of the Swanton Morley Neighbourhood Plan, and I have previously urged Beatley Parish Council to carry out a neighbourhood plan. I think that is still something that they should do, and I'd welcome any efforts from the local people to sort of contact the Parish Council and encourage them to do that. I'd be willing to help with it, because I do think that's something that the village needs, and there is currently grant money available to make that happen as well. So all in all, I think this revised application is a significant improvement on what we had last time, and I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duffield, please.
Thank you, Jim. Parish Council asked me just to reaffirm their objections. Obviously, you've heard from the resident. There are a lot of residents concerned. I can understand the planning problem with being on 3 sides adjacent to the current boundary, which does help get the planning permission. But as you heard from the local person, that was always foreseen when they done the road that size, that they was got to come back for planning on there. If you consider the parish council's objections, appreciate it. The only thing, if the planners are in mind to approve this, could the planners and the building control people, when they go out there, make certain that the measurements which have been quoted today are put in place, that they are those meters away from the neighbouring building, so she has got the right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You didn't want to come back?
I do.
You do?
Can I?
Oh, sorry. Yes, please. Rebecca?
Yeah, just to confirm, as Councillor Atterwill rightly said, that the site has been promoted in the latest version of the local plan in our Reg 18 consultation. However, that is a consultation document, and as you've heard from Simon earlier today, we're going through those consultation responses, and depending on the timeline of the local plan, we'll be looking at each of those individual sites and whether to continue to take them forward into later versions of the local plan. So just because it was promoted in the latest version of the local plan, that doesn't give it any certainty in terms of coming forward, and it certainly doesn't give it any material weight as a housing site at this stage. It's not an allocation in the current local plan. So just to clarify that matter for you members.
Thank you. It's open to questions from members, and I would like to remind you that Matt Sawyer is here from the architect Clayland. So if anyone needed a more technical response, Councillor Clark.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased that there've been discussions, and the question was posed at the last meeting around property number 8 and amenity looks have been resolved, at least to some satisfaction. The question I'm asking for the officer is, I've looked at the conditions, how far we may be able to put an extra condition in, or you think it's necessary to take account of Councillor Duffield's remarks around measurements of that, if this is approved. Thank you.
Any further questions from members? I've got Councillor Bambridge and then Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say thank you. This has come forward, and I think the main concern we spoke of last time has been dealt with. I was interested to hear that a member of the public from the parish was interested in a parish plan, and it's already been said, but I'll confirm it is up to the parish council whether that happens or not the district council, but the district would certainly assist you in that, and I would commend it. I have one, and Councillor Duffield's concern, I think, was noted, and I saw Rebecca writing that down, so I'm pretty certain that will be followed through, so thank you for that. The question I wanted to ask may be a bit obscure, but you mentioned in this in perpetuity, and I think it was mentioned twice in this meeting, but certainly once. And what do you actually mean by that? There is a specific legal definition, which I know, and I just wondered what you mean by in perpetuity.
Sorry, Councillor, did you mean in the context of the nutrient neutrality or the affordable housing? So the affordable housing is forever. So the in perpetuity is forever, so there is no end period to it. The reason I asked the definition between the two is because a lot of the nutrient neutrality mitigation works, a lot of the documentation that Natural England has released has said in perpetuity, and members have been aware that that's been defined in some of our mitigation documents and some of the work we're doing with Norfolk Environmental Credits. Is that that's an 80-year period, but that 80-year period doesn't apply to the affordable housing that is in perpetuity, so forever.
I'm sorry, but neither forever nor 80 years is a correct definition of in perpetuity, and so therefore you should say what you mean.
Can I just come back about the point about the exact measurements, because Councillor Clark raised it and now Councillor Bambridge has raised it as well. So basically we don't need a condition which sets out the exact measurements between the two properties, because condition 2, which is already on the list of conditions, requires the development to be built out in accordance with the approved plans, and that approved plans list will then be updated to include the amended plan, which revises that switch on plot 8. So we don't need an additional condition in my view, members.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Yeah, the questions have gone, Chairman, but I'd just like to commend the officer and the agent working together to put right the, mitigate the issues the resident brought up last time. That was the only issue we could see why it wasn't had a decision then, and it's been brought back. So I'd like that recorded, that we commend the officer and the agent listening to residents and mitigating their concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kybird, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This has demonstrated a fast response from the architect and agent, which is to be commended. I think this is a significant improvement over the previous application. One question. We've heard the offer of electric charging points, but they don't appear to be in the conditions. Is that an enforceable item? Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor, yes. The reason I didn't put that as a condition is because it's now a building control requirement, so it would be doubling up on the legislation.
Okay, no further questions from members. Okay, thank you. So with this item, which is Beatley and Gresson Hall, 3PL 2022-1414, in a full application, your officer's recommendation is one of approval. Could I have a show of hands, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. This item is approved. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, we just clear the decks. Okay, thank you. Our next item is at Rocklands, which is 3PL 2024-0395F. Our speakers are Ollie Jones, who's the agent. Come and sit on the right-hand side, sir. Howard Warnes, who's the applicant, on the right-hand side, and Councillor Sarah Suggett, who's the ward representative. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Are you all right?
Okay, we're 15 minutes early, so what we'll do is take a... Okay. Okay, she's away. Okay, take it away, Rebecca.
Does you need to type I speak, no?
She said to go. We're all right to go, Julia. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a planning application for a self-build dwelling for disabled and easy access in Rocklands, Maple Barns on Magpie Lane. So this is the location plan showing the application site in red, and then the wider ownership of the parties that are making the application in blue. You'll note that there is 2 barns to the frontage of the site that you can see by these 2 rectangles at the frontage of the site, and we've got some images of them at the minute. They're 2 barns. There is no residential accommodation currently on this site, and then the application site, sits just behind those 2 barns for an L-shaped residential dwelling, as you can see, set behind them. Just going back a minute for you members. So the site does lie outside this defined settlement boundary of Rocklands, and it is some way, as you can tell by the arrow and the area outlined in pink, that's the settlement boundary, that is some way out of the settlement boundary for Rocklands. Obviously, members will be aware that policy How 4 of the local plan controls development in villages with boundaries. And policy How 4 requires that new development is located immediately adjacent to settlement boundaries, which it obviously isn't as per this plan. And just to show you an aerial photograph of the site in a bit more context, so you can pick out those 2 rectangular barns, and then the application site sits just behind them. The majority of the site is used for equestrian purposes currently. So as per the application members, you will have noticed that the Parish Council cautiously support the application, their words, not mine, and that there are no statutory objections from any of the statutory parties as set out in the report, and there are 10 representations supporting the development in this location. I'll just show you the location plan. So just as a bit of background, which is detailed a bit more in the officer report, but previously we have refused an application for a dwelling on this site in 2020 as it was contrary to policy How 4 of the local plan. However, unfortunately, since this time, the applicant's partner has had an unfortunate medical condition, which has meant that they need additional care and support for the long term, and that has meant that they unfortunately are unable to return to their existing family home, and they are looking for a new family home which they want to purpose build on this site to accommodate that person's needs. And unfortunately, we're unable to accommodate that person's needs elsewhere in the district with other residential accommodation, and that's why the applicant is looking to build their own home to be able to support their partner and their family. So as I've previously set out, policy How 4 is the prevalent policy in this regard, and unfortunately the development does not comply with policy How 4 of the local plan because the siting is not immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary. Members will also be aware that we have policy How 9 of the local plan. Policy How 9 allows for specialist housing in alternative locations. However, that policy requires that specialist housing to be located close to high order settlements, which unfortunately Rocklands isn't a high order settlement. And on reflection in reading the committee report, I think it's remiss in the report that we haven't mentioned about that the proposal is for a self-build dwelling. And members will be fully aware that the NPPL outside normal housing policies, and this dwelling has been fully designed in relation to the needs of the applicant and the applicant's specific needs in terms of being wheelchair inaccessible, and therefore it would comply with the NPPG in that the applicant has had full regard to the self-build and their needs, and full regard to the final design in terms of the external build and its location in coming up with the location and the design of that building. So they have been instrumental as set out in the MPPG. And although some weight can be given to this, however, policy HAL 4 of the local plan does require self-builds to meet the criteria as set out in policy HAL 4 of the local plan, and therefore the fact that the development isn't immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary means that it remains contrary to policy HAL 4 even though it's self-build. And on the basis that the proposal is contrary to HAL 4 and HAL 9 of the local plan, then in principle, unfortunately, this is not acceptable. So here you can see the proposed elevations. It's a fairly modest 1.5-storey dwelling. It's got 4 bedrooms within it to meet the needs of the family, plus an additional carer. It's fully lift and wheelchair accessible for the needs of the applicant's partner. I've got some images to show you the barns at the minute, but the barns are quite large, so it will be largely hidden from view from the public highway by those existing barns and set behind that. And again, it's only 1.5 stories, so there will be limited views to the proposed dwelling from the road. And the proposed scale and design is considered appropriate to the setting, and the spot plot itself is spacious and there's ample amenity space. This is just the ground floor layout plan, just showing you that it's spacious and all wheelchair accessible. And there is a ground floor bedroom and wet room to meet the applicant's partner's needs. And there is a first floor in that 1/2 story with the additional bedrooms for the family. And I've just got some images of the site. So just Magpie Lane, as you can see there, is behind us. And there are 2 sort of substantial barn buildings which sit to the frontage of the site. And then as per that site plan, the dwelling would sit behind those 2 buildings. This is the plot itself, just showing it's just an area of currently grazing land. And there's just a view of the access to the site there, and you can see those barns just in the distance behind the access there. So obviously the plot itself is fairly remote from neighbouring properties, so we wouldn't envisage that there be any amenity issues. The Highways Authority have no objections subject to conditions, and the applicants have submitted a preliminary, easy for me to say, ecological appraisal with the application, and our ecologists raised no objection to that. GIRAMs would be required members on this application site in the event it was being approved, but obviously we have recommended this one for refusal, and there is no biodiversity net gain because it's exempt as it's a self-build dwelling. So members, on the having regard to the fact that it is contrary to policy and principle, unfortunately we've recommended this one for refusal.
Thank you. I've got Ollie Jones, who's the agent. 1.5 minutes, sir. Oh, sorry. I do apologise. Oh, that's great. I ask every time. They all want to go last. And I slipped you out because you're sitting so far down the room. Councillor Suggett, would you like to go first or last? Of course you can. Even if you didn't say please. Thanks. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. I'd like to start today by saying that there are rarely applications that I feel deserve to be heard at committee more than this one. I strongly believe it is the sort of application that members of the committee expect to hear, and it is precisely what the committee is designed for. The circumstances that this family find themselves in are truly devastating, but I'm always blown away by the resilience that people show when they are placed under such pressures. Nobody would like to find themselves submitting a planning application under such horrific terms, but I think this is to be commended. This family has had an awful lot to come to terms with over the last few months. The thought that has gone into how they can function as a family in the future is plain to see in the application before you. This family has got to make some major life changes and is a long road to recovery. Whilst I appreciate the points given by the officer to refuse this application, I must disagree. I believe that this application does not fail the criteria of HAL 4 and does not constitute unsustainable development. I also do not think it fails HAL 9, specialist housing, and to say it does I feel is disappointing and frustrating. To build a specialist house such as this within the constraints of the village settlement boundary would, in my view, be more harmful, and I believe the self-build criteria, given the circumstances, is appropriate. You will have read that there are ashamedly no facilities in Norfolk for a family with this type of care needs to be supported. Where should they go? Whether it is after an illness or an accident, it is proven that being in your own home is better for people to be able to convalesce and get better. Would we rather they stay in our hospitals? We are asked to consider regularly requests for homes to be converted and adapted for an individual's requirements, disabled fertility grants, for example. It seems bizarre to me that we cannot support a family who are trying their hardest to support themselves to build a purpose-built home to meet the rehabilitation and long-term lifestyle requirements. I ask you to consider what alternative we leave this family with. It cannot be okay for us to make this difficult situation even harder. I therefore strongly urge the committee to consider approving this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Ollie Jones, please, minute and a half, sir.
Good morning, members. As you've just heard, this application is not an ordinary application. Putting it together itself was quite difficult, and you hopefully will have seen the documentation from the NHS as well as all the supporting documentation from the care providers as well on the situation. I can't explain this situation to you in a minute and a half, and I don't expect you to have understood it in a minute and a half either. But what I can say is that the application has been designed and the housing has been designed in accordance with the requirements of Laura and the family moving forwards. Whilst we originally anticipated only needing one carer, it now needs 24/7 care for 2 carers as a minimum to be awake with Laura all of the time, and I'm sure Howard will explain this to you a bit more in a moment. The care needs for Laura are more significant than anyone originally could anticipate and could have even thought about. The family have had to put this application together so that they can live together, have carers living with them, and the house has been designed around that, and the whole situation around this dwelling coming together has had to be put together very, very quickly because the situation escalated very quickly. I could bleat on about policies to you and it would make no difference. This application is an emotive application. It's an application where I agree with Councillor Suggett. It is exactly what the committee has put together for to hear this type of application. Brocklands Parish haven't objected to it. They've had numerous meetings with the applicant as well to discuss this and had opportunities to discuss it with them. Everyone who has been involved in the application has heard it on its merits, and I hope you will agree with me that this is an application that should be put before you and should be passed on its merits. I'm happy to answer any questions. As I said, this can't really be explained inside of 3 minutes. I'll pass over to Howard Warnes now.
Yep, so I'm Howard, so nice to meet everybody. I'll do my best to get through this. Currently our housing situation doesn't meet anywhere near the standards which Laura requires, hence why we've put the application in. She's currently at the Coleman Centre Hospital in Norwich, set to be discharged within the next few weeks as long as they can get some sort of care plan in front of her. We've recently extended as much as we can the current house we have, which doesn't even come close to the size of the room we need. There's no room for carers, there's no room to really wash Laura, hence why this application is purpose-built to be able to look after all of her needs. I'm not going to go into detail on Laura. For that reason. But yeah, I'm here to answer any questions, which I'll do my best to answer. You know, Brocklands is Brocklands is where the horses and the dogs. Apologies. So yeah, I probably open it up to questions. It's difficult for me to talk at the moment, so open up to any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Well done, Howard. Questions from members. I've got Councillor Attwell, please.
Chairman, I've got a question here for the planning officers, really. I'm looking at policy 809 with regard to specialist housing, and it strikes me that we could potentially give more weight to one of the 4 criteria down there than others. We don't have to take account of all of the criteria. That's what this committee is here for. And I'm particularly looking at HOU 9, section C, ensuring the design and scale of schemes is appropriate to the setting and surroundings with no adverse impact on local character and amenity. Now, you've clearly set out in the report that there isn't a visual impact problem with the dwelling in the current setting. Yes, it's not adjacent to the settlement boundary, but it seems to me that the rigidity of our policy here is such that we're expecting a dwelling like this to be built next to a higher order or in a higher order settlement. You've already said in the officer report that that isn't available within the district. So therefore, we've got that's a bit contrary in my view. So I think that section C in here should be given significant weight in our decision making. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Bambridge.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have a question. I heard the applications and the submissions, and I'm happy with it. I think we have here, it seems to me, an established medical need. I've had 2 of those in my ward over the 21 and a bit years I've been a councillor, and one of those the committee refused and one of them it accepted. I think we have here 2 reasons why we can veer from our policy, and I accept that our officers have to go by the policy, and that is self-build and medical need. And if I can say that in this case, this district will have another house that is suitable for this sort of application in perpetuity. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Attwell returning.
Yeah, I think Councillor Bambridge makes some excellent points. I think the problem for the officers is you have to give planning reasons. The medical side of it is extremely important to the applicant. I get that, but that's not a planning material consideration. Rebecca's nodding, so I'm in the right area. So what we need to do as a committee, and it's a shame that our solicitor wasn't here because he's more eloquent with the words than myself. If we are minded to grant approval of this, we need to obviously come up with our planning reasons why we recommend, we're going against the officer's recommendation and we recommend it for approval. So coming back to, yes, I think the self-build is a very good point, and I think that's a good argument to make. But I'm looking at the specialist housing. This application clearly doesn't meet all of these criteria, but I don't think this is written in such a way that you have to meet all of those criteria. So I'm looking to Rebecca to try and tell us what we can and cannot do, really, because we will need, if we are minded to vote against refusal, the officer's recommendation, the next question is going to be, what's the proposal? And we need to have that answer. Is that making sense?
Would you like to?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if you read policy HOW 9, the 4 criteria are listed, which I mentioned one of them, which was ensuring that new specialist housing is located within a higher order settlement. And Councillor Attewell's outlined criteria C, which says ensuring the scale and design of the schemes is appropriate to the setting and surroundings and will have no adverse impact on the local character and amenity, which, as set out in the officer report, it's very clear that we don't consider that there will be an impact on character and amenity. Members, it's completely within your remit to interpret that policy and give weight to those individual criteria within that policy as you wish to make a decision on this application. It is an and policy in terms of the criteria, but obviously you can give more weight to some criteria than others in the determination of the application. What officers done is read those criteria as a whole because they are and criteria, not or criteria, in reaching their decision. but it's completely within your remit, members, to look at that and interpret that in a different way. The same with the self-build. So it's completely within your remit, members, to give material weight to the self-build, more or less than officers have done, as I set out in my presentation.
Councillor Atwell again, please. Oh, Councillor Kybird then, please.
I think in my view, the lack of and the need for specialist accommodation overrides the more general planning reasons. Thank you.
Councillor Kybird, that is a really good point. That what isn't mentioned in this officer report, and we often mention to you here at committee, is there's a significant lack of specialist housing across the district, and there is a Norfolk study which we often refer to in committee, which demonstrates there is a lack of specialist housing to meet specialist needs, and that the applicants have set that out in their submission, that there is no specialist housing available, which is part of their desire to build their new home.
Councillor Plummer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and get through this without breaking down. We've just gone through all this with a friend of ours. Their son at 34 developed cancer. To try and find any help at all, live in or out, was nearly impossible unless you have the right place. Now, as a committee, we have to put ourselves in different positions, and I'm putting my position where we see what happened to this family when they tried to do what this gentleman's trying to do. If it's one of our relations that were like this, we would have no hesitation in passing this. I have no hesitation in passing this, because if we don't use common sense about something like that, then we shouldn't be on this committee. Feel so strong about it that that's how I feel. So I'm going to support this fully. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, this is a complex application, and I would have to say that the ward rep, Councillor Suggett, summed it all up, actually. That's why we're here as a committee. Councillor Aswell pointed out, you know, how all the planning policies are not black and white. There's grey areas, bullet points, which we always look at. And I feel as well under the HOW 4, self-build, it's not going to be a standalone building in the countryside, as it's already built up there with barns and things. So I think we can add a little weight there, that we could move that over a little bit and add more weight to HOW 9, obviously. Because every meeting I go to as Breckland's representative at the QEH, the bed blocking is because people can't be discharged to go home and be looked after properly. There's no facilities, it's just a nightmare. So I think we should add more weight to like I said, HOW 9 with what the bullet point Councillor Atwell referred to.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say, I shall be supporting the application on the grounds mentioned by Councillor Atwell and Councillor Kybird, having weighed all that up and also taken into account the officer's most recent remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as Chairman, I'm going to preempt the presented recommendation from the officers. I'm going to take Councillor Atwell as from the floor, recommending that we approve this item. I'm going to do it that way round. You are proposing, could I have a seconder that we approve this item? Councillor Plummer was first with his hand up. So preempting everything else, the recommendation from the floor is that we approve this item. Could I have a show of hands, please? And I'm going to make that the full set, please, if you don't mind, Jenny. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Reasons from the floor.
The reasons from the floor, I think we've quite...
You're going to have to take.
Oh, Councillor Atwell, fire him off again.
I would say, taking account of the fact that the district does not have sufficient specialist housing, and the fact that this is a self-build project, self-build proposal, and the fact that policy HOU 9 section C has clearly been met, this application should be approved.
I think that's sufficient.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and we wish your wife all the best, sir. Thank you. We will have just a 10-minute break. It's just gone 5 past. So we can come here just after 1/4 past. And our next item is at Wendling. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for allowing us to have a short break. We now move on to Wendling, 2 Mill Close Manor Drift, 3PL 2024-0189, again in a full application. And I have got speakers Elton Whitting, who's an objector, 1.5 minutes, if you'd like to come and sit on the right-hand side. Also Linda Lee, who's an objector. We've got Jennifer Hunt, who's the applicant, and Councillor Atterwill is crossing the floor for this item as well. It doesn't matter. I know the board today. It doesn't matter, honestly. That's only a guideline. It's actually for my guidance, so I will go to the applicant and the agent, but that doesn't. They speak up anyway. Okay, fine. Over to you then, please, Will. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Chairman. This is application 3PL 2024-0189F for a retrospective planning application for equestrian development of a 20 by 40 metre sand menage constructed for owners' use at 2 Mill Close, Manor Drift, Wendling. This is a location plan of the site. And this is the site in the wider context. So the A47 to the north there, and the Dereham Road to the south. This is a proposed site plan, although again noting it is a retrospective planning application. The overall site area is approximately 0.95 hectares, equivalent to 2.3 acres. The menage measures 40 metres in length by 20 metres in width and is positioned in the southwest portion of the field. And then Mill Close there on the screen is the applicant's property. This is a section plan of the menage, comprising a sand base with hardcore sub-base. Some site photos. So just for a bit of context for the site, we previously refused planning permission, retrospective permission for the menage in December last year, with the reason for refusal being the location and very close proximity of the menage would result in unacceptable amenity impacts in terms of increased overlooking, perception of overlooking, and noise and disturbance on the neighbouring dwelling, the Croft, and its rear garden, contrary to Policy Commo 3 of the Breckland Local Plan 2023. This photo was taken during a site visit and has been taken from the neighbouring property, the Croft. And these photos were taken in December last year. So obviously everything is bare. And that's within the garden of the Croft. And then again in the neighbouring garden, just noting the proximity and openness of the site. There is some immature hedging planted, but besides that, it is just the stock fencing there. So this is the current situation. These photos were taken in June. So obviously heavy foliage and everything growing this time of year. So since the previously refused application, as highlighted in the officer's report, a 6-foot, a 6-foot clothes-boarded fence has been erected between the menage and the neighbouring boundary, with the menage set below the ground level at which the fence is constructed. And then this is a photo taken during the winter months. And then some photos of the menage itself from the application side, including the fencing that has been installed. And then this is, you've got the applicant's dwelling to the right of the screen there, and then numbers 1 and 2 Manor Drift to the left, and then the Croft is just tucked away in the centre of the screen. And then there's the menage and fence itself. This is a photo submitted by the owner and resident of the Croft, the dwelling immediately adjacent to the menage. So the issues arising from the proposal regarding amenity impacts have been set out in detail within the officer's report. Since the previously refused application, a 6-foot closed-boarded fence has been erected between the neighbouring dwelling, the Croft, and the menage. The resident of the croft has stated that issues concerning overlooking, perception of overlooking, and noise and disturbance remains as a result of the close proximity and use of the menage. No objection has been received by the council's environmental health team, and no objection was received by them on the previously refused application either. The council do still hold concern, given the nature and close proximity of the development, resulting in a negative impact on the privacy of the occupiers of the croft, reducing their enjoyment of their property and back garden area, suffering a material reduction in their levels of privacy. It is duly noted, though, the owners of the menage could lawfully use and ride on the land, regardless of the location of the menage. Users would not be prevented riding in the field in close proximity to the neighbouring property, causing a degree of overlooking and perception of overlooking. However, the construction of the menage in the current area would intensify this use and these amenity impacts. In addition, the previously refused retrospective planning application is a material consideration and afforded significant weight in this regard. Given the very close proximity of the menage to the existing dwelling, the croft, and all associated noise and disturbance, including overlooking and perception of overlooking on the residential amenity, it is concluded that the proposal does not accord with policy Commo 3 of the Breckland local plan, and there would also be conflict with paragraph 135F of the MPPF, where it requires that development creates places with a high standard of amenity for existing and future users. These reasons set out above and within the officer's report, this application is accordingly recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. I've got Elton Whiting, please. A minute and a half, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so we met with the applicants at the very start of this construction in May 23. We told them we have nothing against them having a sand arena. But could they please build it somewhere else on their land and not right up against our boundary? They have 2.5 acres of land where they could have built this menage. We suggested a couple of locations on their land, and we said we would not object to those if they were built at those locations at the far end of the field, away from our boundary. We also said we would object to the construction if it was built on our boundary. We also said that they need to apply for planning permission for this construction. We had no further correspondence from the applicants, and approximately 2 weeks later, more building commenced, and this went on until the end of August 23, when it was more or less finished. At the time, we explained to the applicants that this would give us considerable privacy issues. We explained that we've lived there for 17 years, and one of the reasons we bought our house was we had a private rear garden. By building this menage up against our boundary, we wouldn't have that anymore. Point number 2, the applicants and other horse owners, residents of the village, keep citing animal welfare issues. This is not an animal welfare issue, this is a planning issue. The sand arena could have been built elsewhere on the applicant's land. Point number 3, we object on privacy grounds. We've submitted photographs which the council officer has shown on his presentation. Especially in winter, when there's no foliage on our hedge that we've planted, the applicants and riders can see straight into our kitchen. We also have bedrooms in the rear garden. So we feel this is affecting our amenity rights. Would you like to continue?
No, you keep going.
I'd like to use Linda's time to keep going.
Is that all right? We've come together.
Yeah. We also appreciate we have no right to review, and this has never been about review for us. This is about privacy, noise and disturbance. We'd also like to say on the applicant's reply statement on the website that we have not encroached on their land. We could go into this more in detail, but we understand that this is not a planning issue. There's also financial investments as being cited as a reason for getting this through. The point of it is this could have been built somewhere else. Had the applicants gone through the proper process of applying for planning permission, minimal money would have been spent on this, and it could have been built somewhere else. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you'd like to...
No, it's right. We came together, so that's...
Oh, I do.
Yes.
Sorry, I was just laughing a little
No,
bit.
No.
no, it's just, yeah, no.
Okay, oh well, that's 3 minutes anyway, 3 minutes 3, but sorry,
No.
I wish I'd realised, I thought you were two neighbours or.
No, no,
No, we both live together at the
I
croft.
do apologise.
Okay.
Okay, I've got Jennifer Hunt, please, who's the applicant. And you have 3 minutes, please.
We built our menage to serve two functions. First of all, to provide turnout for our horses, so they in winter they can stretch their legs, groom each other, get down and roll, and to provide exercise, which is obviously important for the welfare of an athletic animal, and we can do that in hand or ridden. Both of these things are really important, particularly in the winter when it's too dangerous to turn the horses out in the fields because they're too muddy and they get wounds on their legs. 90% of what we do, particularly in the winter, is turn out and exercise in hand, and it's completely obscured by the 6-foot fence. You can't see it at all. I appreciate the objectors' concerns about location. We genuinely built this menage the only place where it was sensible to. One whole side of our property is bordered by the A47, and the noise can be quite frightening for the horses. Building the menage at a distance would mean that the horses would have to walk through mud to get there, and it would defeat the point of trying to help with their welfare in the winter. We chose the flattest and the driest area, and the area that we were already using to ride them and turn them out. We're not using it anymore. It's now just genuinely much safer for the horses. We did do this without planning. This was my mistake. I misinterpreted my permitted development rights, and I've apologised for this, and we've been fully compliant with Breckland Council ever since it's come to our attention. I do understand the concerns about privacy. It's genuinely quite rare that I get to ride my horse, and I've actually included a picture of all the weeds growing in the menage at the moment, but I work full time as a vet. But on the rare occasion that I do get to ride, I understand that my head can be seen floating moments in time above the fence. I'd like to perhaps suggest that it's no different to when the child that lives next door plays on his climbing frame. It genuinely is moments in time. I'd also like to point out that the garden is an L shape, and the house is completely obscured by this very tall and mature foliage. You have to come around the corner of the L to see the section of the fence where my head would occasionally be visible. You can't see windows of the house or anything like that. There is also a lot of foliage growing very rapidly along the fence line there, and it's being chopped down, and I've got photos of it actually being chopped down the weekend that this second planning application went live. Had it been left, or if it could be left, it would very quickly provide all the privacy that was required. Having said that, we would be happy to take responsibility for providing the privacy that is felt necessary, and we had discussed installing some screening trees. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to establish a dialogue, but we remain very committed to overcoming these issues with any further financial investment that's required. I just ask Breckland Council, please don't deprive me of this resource that I really need to help maintain the welfare of my horses, particularly going into winter when I feel there is a genuinely fair and reasonable compromise to be had. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Atwell, please. 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an interesting application. For me, the fundamental issue with regard to the overlooking, because I think the officers really, this comes down to policy COM 03, and I think it was already mentioned in the officer report that even if the menage wasn't there, if the applicant chose to ride their horses on that piece of ground anyway, they would still possibly be seen over the fence, and there isn't a damn thing anybody can do about that. I think at least having the menage where it is does regularise this. I do think the Environmental Health Officer's report is incredibly helpful. It recommends a number of conditions. Obviously, one is that there's no commercial use, and this is certainly a domestic usage. Also that there's no lighting, and also that there's no speaker equipment in connection with the use of the menage. I've actually been out and visited the site. The menage is set lower than the top of the fence, so you're looking at a height of approximately 7.5 foot in old money. And the applicant has planted new hedging, I think that's beech hedging, in front of the fence as well. That will take time to establish, but that will be allowed to grow up at a height higher than the fence was there. So I think also, looking at the application, Norfolk County Council Highways have overreached in their requirements in terms of the access track. The access track is not adopted highway. That is basically a rough track owned by a local farmer, and the residents down there have right of way over it. I think the applicant has tried to carry out some remedial work to that track, but I think in terms of expecting the applicant to be able to control the visibility displays and the entrance to that track is not within their remit because they don't own it. So that's third party responsible for that. And there are existing households, the applicant and the neighbouring properties who've been using that for years anyway. So I don't really think that should be a consideration. I did talk to our County Council rep, Mark Kittle-Morris, for that area, and he was the opinion as well that he thought that County may have overreached in their requirements. So all in all, I think I would suggest to members that you have to take this to its logical conclusion that if the menage wasn't there, if this application is refused and the menage has to be moved or taken away, the applicant could still, well within their rights, ride the horses up and down that land anyway. The menage itself, I can't really see what the noise issue is, because the menage, anybody knows about them, is a sand and sort of a cloth fibrous material in the bottom of it. So you don't get the clip-clop of hooves when you're on that. That's I would suggest they've done everything to minimise the noise. It's well constructed. Yes, I can see that the neighbours have a concern, but I think that the applicant has done quite a bit to try and mitigate that already. And so with the planting of the hedging and the fact that the greenery in the winter months, we're talking in the summer months, the foliage helps with all the screening anyway. So I would recommend that officers, members, you give consideration to actually approving this application and regularising its use with conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to questions, could I ask Will just to put the photo up of the rider in situ, please? I don't remember, with Will's presentation, there is a photograph taken of, I believe, our young lady here riding her horse around. Unfortunately, we're not allowed, due to data protection, to show you her face, which you wouldn't have seen anyway. You'd have only seen her nose. Very pretty nose, I do. But we've had to blot it out with a little blue dot. But that is literally, well, that's her and her shoulder above, just so you can understand. And I don't think it matters, but do you know how many hands your horse is? 15.3. Oh, that's quite, yeah, I don't know. That sounds quite a lot to me. 15 hands then. Okay, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about with regards to the area. Okay, thank you. It's open to questions from members. Councillor Plummer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can the officer tell me what reasons were given last year for refusal? Since we've got one here, it says, if I remember the history, it says it was refused. 23. Oh, sorry.
The same reasons for refusal, the increased noise and disturbance and overlooking from the use of the menage, and as you've heard from today, subsequently the applicants erected a 6 foot, 8 foot. Oh, okay, apologies, thank you. So a 6 foot fence has been erected, but the menage sits 2 feet down, so it sits 8 feet for the adjacent neighbouring property.
Yeah, but that hasn't changed your mind to recommend refusal. So there must be something. What I'm trying to do is define last time and why you're still, if they put the fence there, why haven't you said approval? That's what I'm trying to get at.
So it is officer's opinion, as Councillor Attwell's quite rightly set out, that this field does have an equestrian use, so that the applicant could ride their horses on that piece of land at any time previously before the menage. But the menage is obviously for, and as you've heard from the applicant, for exercising their horse and for use. And we consider as officers, there is intensification of use because the menage is in that position. And as you can see from the photos, There is overlooking when people are riding their horses. We accept that you won't always have a horse rider in a menage, and that you could use, sorry, I don't know the correct term, on a tether, on a rope. Apologies for not knowing the correct wording, and that you may exercise your horse without a rider on it. However, in doing so, we consider that there would be increased noise and disturbance in that particular location. And although we accept, and it's set out in the officer report, that any rider could ride along that route at any time without planning permission, the presence of the menage would generate an intensification of use in that area. That could lead to some overlooking, certainly the perception of overlooking, and the neighbours are here to tell you that, and noise and disturbance. Members, it's completely within your remit to make a judgment on whether that noise and disturbance is significant or not, and to have regard to any conditions that may be appropriate in the event you don't believe that there is a significant impact. But given that we refused the application before, we consider that there is, and we've recommended it for a refusal.
Any further questions from members? Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah, I'll just to clarify what's just been said. So first time it was refused. It was a menage just built, was it? And there was no screening, which I could understand wouldn't have been acceptable at that point without that screening. When you look at the picture without screening, and then instead of having advice, the lady then used permitted rights. She thought she had permitted rights just to build the fence, and then we're here today with that. Is that what happened?
No.
To try.
Yes, Rebecca.
So, unfortunately, as the lady set out, and she's already apologised for that, and you know that's absolutely fine to make a retrospective planning application. But the menage was built. There was no screening in between the menage. There was a post and rail fence, like a stock fence, in between the neighbouring property and the field. The applicant then put in retrospective planning permission with the stock fence there for the menage. We subsequently refused that on the grounds of noise disturbance and overlooking. The applicant has used their PD rights, and they do have permitted development to erect a 2-metre high fence without planning permission. So the menage aside, they do have permitted development to erect that fence, so that doesn't require planning permission today. And they've resubmitted the application on the grounds that that would mitigate the impact. Members, it's up to you to decide whether you consider that fence adequately mitigates the impact in terms of noise disturbance and overlooking on the neighbouring properties.
Councillor Anscombe.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I ask the applicant, how many horses do you keep, please?
There's 6 horses on the property. One of them never gets ridden, it's too old. One of them is a pony, so isn't ridden. And the other 2, their job isn't in the menage, so genuinely only one actually ever gets ridden in the menage. But there are 6 equines on the property.
Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I'll just come back, ask the applicant. Will you be doing the exercise of horses riding every day? And obviously you would have no reason to look to your left. I assume you've got to keep looking forward when you're riding past the property. So I can't see any reason why you'd be looking in anybody else's property. But can you answer?
I think that's a really good point. We're struggling to put everything into the 3 minutes, but massively, when you're riding a horse similar to driving a car, it would be incredibly dangerous to look anywhere else than immediately in front of you and slightly down to the ground. I'm absolutely not looking anywhere else, and actually both of the pictures, I wouldn't mind if my head was visible, because you very clearly see that I'm looking down at where I'm going. I've got absolutely no reason. It would be dangerous to try and look anywhere else. In answer to your question, I think the most I ever get to ride is about twice a week, and you know, I work full time, life happens, there are weeks and weeks and weeks go by when I never get to use it really at all, but we need to exercise them in hand, and I think it's demonstrated by how many weeds are in it at the moment. Thank you.
Any other further questions from members at all? No. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, on this item at Wendling, 3PL 2024-0189F, Your officer's recommendation on this one is one of refusal. Could I have a show of hands, please? 3. And those against? 6 from the floor. Could I have a recommendation from one of you, Councillor Wilkinson?
Yeah, I feel the committee feels that the perception of overlooking won't exist and won't affect the amenities of the neighbouring properties. Yeah, and we can't see there's any evidence for noise and disturbance with a standard-based menage.
I think what I'm hearing, and Councillor Khyber might be about to say the same thing, that you think that the erection of the fence adequately mitigates any impact from overlooking noise and disturbance. That's what I was hearing when you were discussing it.
Councillor Khyber, would you like to second that then, or? Councillor Atwell, would you like to speak now, please?
Thank you, Chairman. That's most kind of you. It was just to mention that if I'm hearing that members are minded to approve the application, I think account should be given of what the Environmental Health Officer said in their report. As I think I mentioned when speaking, that I think the applicant is very happy and that would regularise matters if we as a condition that this was for personal use only, not commercial. That there's no speaker equipment that's used in connection with the menage, and that there's no lighting in connection with the menage also. I think they would be adequate conditions to help the neighbours.
Yes, I think it's been made quite clear and can be conditioned. Okay, so from the floor, a recommendation of approval has been put forward and seconded. Could I have a show of hands for approval then, please? 1, 2. And those against? 3.
Are they delegating the remainder of the conditions to us?
Yes, please delegate the remainder of conditions. Okay, thank you very much. That item is approved. Thank you. We clear the room on that situation. If I could just move on to item 10. Item 10 today is the applications determined by the Deputy Chief Executive. Those are there for your information. And item 11 is the appeals summary for your information also. And with that, I close this meeting. Okay.